Welcome to Retire Smart with David Brooks. I'm Chip Maxwell. David, we start with what I guess is a public service announcement. I've got a headline from the Nebraska Examiner. Actually, this was also in the World Herald and several Nebraska news outlets. The headline from the Examiner reads, Nebraskans failing to claim $200 million in state income tax credits. The governor is among those sounding the alarm here. What's going on, David, and why do you think so many people are missing out on this?
Well, all right, so number one, let's make sure people know how to claim their tax credit refund, number one. So if you are unaware of this, you may call in at the end of the show, and we will get you that link. You'll just get your email and name, and we will be able to get that to you so you understand how to do this. But so number one, fundamentally, this is the problem with how they're trying to address property taxes here in the state of Nebraska. This is ridiculous that you have to go through this to get the reduction, right? So you can't reduce property taxes on the state level, which is what they're doing, because the money gets wasted, right? It's obviously not being used. $200 million unused. Only 40% of Nebraskans have filed for what they've qualified for in these refunds. And we went through this last year. If you remember, we talked to our client base and to our audience about this, and it goes undeal. And for some people, this is over $1,100. And in fact, Governor Ricketts was quoted in Lincoln, Nebraska. If you are assessed at $250,000, it's like $1,140 in a refund you're going to get. But you have to apply for it, Chip. And people don't know it's there, and nor should they, because they shouldn't have to go do this. They shouldn't have to jump through these holes. It should automatically be done for them if the state's serious about trying to help reduce the tax expense for Nebraskans. And this is why, again, why don't we, instead of wasting our time passing this and putting money in this tax credit fund that doesn't affect the change of your millage rates, doesn't change your valuation formulas, why don't we just set some precedents that the school boards, et cetera, are capped at what they can spend, or the local municipalities, and get serious about property tax relief?
Control the spending. Imagine that.
Oh yeah. Well, you're going to really here's what's this is going to be a bigger problem, and we'll have to talk about this more on a future show. But with the recession we are in, and yes, we are in one, regardless of what you're told on the white noise news, and it's going to get worse next year. And the area that's cracking now is housing, right? Housing is really, and the interest rates just went up again this week, right? And so 30-year mortgages are well over 6% now. And the cost of housing has gone up. Someone buying a home today, it's literally double the price from just 9 months ago to buy the same home in certain mortgage amounts, depending on how much you're financing here. We're going to go into a housing recession for a while, which means house prices are going to go down in value. Do you think they're budgeting down at the state or the school board or to reduce your tax bill next year based on a lower valuation?
That's not how it works.
Of course not. So what are they going to do? And this is, again, why the way our governments spend our money is not efficient. They're just not good stewards. But again, we'd have to get into this on another day. But listen, folks, unfortunately, this is available to you, but not in the simplest form. So you have to actually simply go online and apply for this credit. And if you'd like the link to the state website to do that, contact us here on the show.
Well, if you're not able to stay with us all the way through the show, perish the thought. But if some emergency arises and you're not able to stay with us all through the show, it is 402-369-7777. Give us a call and we can provide the link for you. I have gone through the process. It's not too bad, folks. The link gets you through and you can claim the credit. But you do, as David says, you have to be proactive. You have to go get it. I mean, that might be a little annoying to us, but we're fired up about this at Retire Smart because we are passionate about tax planning. We don't show you how to cheat the system, but we make sure you don't leave anything on the table for government that you don't have to. And this is a classic example. So give us a call, 402-369-7777, if you need that link to the site where you can claim your state income tax credit.
Just so you know, you may live out of state and have property here. You still qualify. So, out-of-state taxpayers, if they own property, real estate here, can potentially save as well. And again, you got to be proactive in mitigating your tax bill. We can potentially save you some dollars. Find out now.
402-369-7777. All right, on to the big picture, David. CNBC headline, more home builders lower prices as sentiment falls for 9th straight month.
Yeah, this is not a good signal for a healthy economy, as we've talked about extensively here in recent shows. We're going through a recession, and it's going to get worse because housing typically has to find a bottom for the economy to find a bottom, and housing is just starting its downtrend. Now, don't think that your house is going to plummet 40% in value, et cetera. We're not saying that. No one knows the future with certainty. But the reality is your home is not probably going to be worth a whole lot more 3 years from today than it is today, and that's simply because the cost to acquire homes is getting more expensive. I just mentioned mortgage rates, et cetera. And so housing is starting to slow down. We're seeing list price are starting to be cut, within 15 to 30 days of listings. It's no longer list your house and sell it in 3 hours and get 5 offers, et cetera. And that's going to continue and get uglier as we get into a recession. And so when home builders are not building homes, this creates another problem on the other side, because then there won't be enough supply when the economy is healthy, right? And so it's a double-edged sword here. And this is why the Federal Reserve is trying to thread this needle, but it's going to be very difficult for them to engineer a soft landing based on this kind of data.
So, David, what I'm wondering is, if I'm a home builder, has the cost of lumber and the other inputs, have those gone down?
They have significantly. The cost of materials are starting to come down as supply chains go. But now here's the problem. It's not the supply chain fixing that is driving the prices down at this point. Supply chains have kind of gotten themselves back in line. Now it's demand that's pressuring prices lower, that we're losing demand. And so if we lose demand, that creates something we're going to be facing on the other side of this, and that's deflationary pressures in different parts of our economy. So we have high inflation on sticky inflation things, but there can be deflationary pressures on corporate America, and that can be scary, and we're going to have to talk about that again on another show. We talked about that, 2 years ago, why you don't want aggressive deflation in an economy, because that can spiral pretty ugly as well. So again, but prices are falling in what the materials to put in, but their labor costs are still continuing to skyrocket and go up. And then the cost to borrow money to build the house, borrow money on the house, et cetera, is rising and rising. And one of the things we talked about a couple months ago, Chip, is what's different here in America is, like, when you go to contract with a builder, you typically put a deposit down, right? And then once they go to start the home, you're required to, if it's a massive builder, you may not be required to get the mortgage yet until they turn the keys over to you. But if you're custom building your house, you're going to have to go what's called a construction loan. Basically, the bank's going to lend, give tranches of money to the builder as they're progressing, and then you actually get your real mortgage once it's been CO'd, right? The building is certified for occupancy, and the closing officially happens. They turn over the keys. In China, we're seeing real estate collapse, and in China, it's very different. You start the mortgage payment the day you sign the contract. No matter how long it takes them to build it, you have to start making your payments, and you have hundreds of thousands of people in major cities in China that are basically boycotting making these payments, creating some serious economic pain. And we don't have that in today's show, but again, China is another big issue that we'll talk about in the future, where they are going into a recession, which is going to push a global recession because of the amount of goods and services that they produce.
China strikes again. All right, David, we shift gears from housing to vehicles. Fox Business headline: typical monthly payment for a new vehicle hits record $743. Record high average purchase price is just over $48,000. That's up 10.8% from a year ago. Takes 42 and a half weeks to earn a car, up from 37.7 a year ago. Not good news on this front, David.
No, it's not. I mean, that's average payment over $700 a month. And you add insurance on that vehicle and gas and maintenance, and that means the average car buyer is having to commit $1,000 a month for their transportation. You talk about having rough inflationary pressures. That's amazing to me that is that high. I couldn't fathom that. That kind of payment, and if you had to have two of those, that's just like, wow. But look, the average price continues to go up because, again, their supply has been a little bit short, and they're still charging a premium on new cars because the inventories have been a little thin. We did see car data, though, slow down a little bit this last month, too. So that's an area that we think will start to go backwards, as well as used car prices have already done that. Used car prices peaked out a while back, about 8 or 9 months ago, and are declining again. But, yeah, the average cost of this vehicle, and this is an input that, unfortunately, a majority of Americans have to make, and it's part of their monthly budget because we don't teach financial literacy, unfortunately, in most places in this country, and so people don't learn to save up and pay. Why we don't like you having financing a vehicle just basic math here. It's a depreciating asset, not an appreciating asset. So debt on appreciating assets is not a bad thing, but your car goes down in value every day and every mile you drive it, right? It's going to go down in value, and you're financing it, and the cost of that financing we talk about just keeps going up. So you end up with a negative equity in your car, and that's not a good place to be.
I'm only going to allow you about 30 seconds for this, David, but I figured we better hit this. In fact, I better warn my father-in-law. He owns a Tesla. Here's the Fox Business headline. Tesla owner says he's locked out after battery died. Replacement costs $26,000.
Yeah, we talked about this recently. These batteries are very large and they're very expensive. Not only have to pay to replace them, but then you got the labor to put them in there. And now this was, I think it was a 2013 model, so it was about 10 years old. But that's what we're hearing: 8 to 12 years of battery life on these vehicles. And the Model S is it's a $100,000 car. And then you got to go pay $27,000 just to replace your battery. That is pretty darn expensive. And of course, people think it's free to drive it, the fuel in it. No, look at your electric bill right now. They're starting to go up quite a bit. So the cost to charge that vehicle is getting more and more expensive. In fact, in countries in Europe right now, it's more expensive to charge your vehicle than it is to pay their high cost of fuel. So that's an alarming stat.
Hey, don't get locked out when it comes to good retirement planning to optimize your retirement. See what I did there, folks? Get the complimentary report card, 402-369-7777. No charge, no obligation. We'll check your whole financial situation. Maybe you're in good shape. Maybe you need to make a few changes. 402-369-7777 for a complimentary report card. Up next, the Nebraska football program has suffered from a lack of good leadership for nearly 2 decades. No project of any kind in any area of life can succeed without good leadership. But what is good leadership? We explore that next on Retire Smart with David Brooks. Welcome back to Retire Smart with David Brooks. I'm Chip Maxwell. David, you are passionate about leadership. Not only have you built a business, but in your personal life, in church activities, you have gone to leadership summits and conferences. You have spoken at leadership summits and conferences. You coach up your advisors and all of us here at Retire Smart. You encourage people to exercise leadership in whatever sphere they operate. Leadership is a passion for you. And I want to use Nebraska football as a vehicle to talk about leadership in general. Now, I noted when I asked you, when Scott Frost was fired as the football coach, and I noted some people said, well, that's premature. If they would have waited a couple more weeks, they could have saved $7.5 million. You didn't hesitate for a second. You said, absolutely not. He had to go right away. So I take from that part of exercising good leadership is removing bad leadership when it's necessary. Even if you don't have the next leader ready to step in, you've got to start to detoxify your operation right away.
Absolutely. I mean, there's look, if you're going to be a leader in any organization, whether it's social, economical, business, volunteering, or it's school, right? Leaders are not born; they are trained, right? And leaders certainly have some instincts, and you can identify this. I mean, I remember my first job off the farm working at Chick-fil-A, right? And you go do more. You see something needs to get done, and you're done it, and then you're identified by somebody above you. Good leaders identify those that are instinctively kind of stepping up and doing more, and then hey, we'd like you to go ahead and do this and give more responsibility, and then see if they take hold, and then they will start to pour in and train leaders. And you'll see this in the military ranks, you'll see this in corporate ranks, and even in volunteer organizations if they are run well. My favorite leadership guru, who I was blessed to share the stage with last year, is John Maxwell. He was a pastor who's turned into the leadership guru. Has over 80 published books. Over 35 of those are New York Times bestsellers. So he's just an amazing guy. In fact, he's going to be at a conference I'll be attending here coming up in a few weeks. I'm going to get some one-on-one training with John. And so I'm passionate about going, but he has so many, what we call them, his isms, if you will, and his quotes. But my favorite quote is, listen, everything rises and falls on leadership, period. So if you want to go to Nebraska football, I will tell you, just since I've been in Nebraska in a little over 5 years, we've had 3 ADs. Right, 3 different athletic directors. That is not stable. That is not stability. And the first thing your attribute you're looking for is stability in a leader. And so the regions and presidents need to make a decision. And of course, there's all the rhetoric you'll find on social media. Trev Albert's good or bad, but what I've seen good so far. But you need to have stable leadership. So then when he does hire the next coach, he doesn't need to rush. He needs to make a decision, but it needs to be a definitive one in the direction they feel they need to go. Now, I could give you my humble opinion on all that, but I'm not going to pretend to be a football coach or what have you. But as you said, Scott Frost, had high hopes, right? He took UCF, where I went to school.
Your alma mater.
He took UCF to the promised land, and it was amazing. And he just did not get the results here. And I'm not here to go to the reasons why or why not, et cetera. But for leaders, you have to tell your team that you're going to take action. You have to show that you're going to have accountability with the leaders you entrust. And it's the same in business, in church, in football. It doesn't matter. You've got to hold your leaders have to be held accountable, and they have to hold their teammates accountable. And I can tell you, I mean, I read a lot of books, go to a lot of conferences, listen to leadership podcasts. I mean, I dive into this stuff, and I think it's Jim Collins that had it, is like, listen, you got to get the right people on the bus, and you got to get the wrong people off the bus. And then once you know who's on the bus, you got to make sure they're sitting in the right seats. And as organizations grow, as we have done here, sometimes you have to move people around and put them in different chairs, so to speak, so that they can flourish and be their best as well.
Well, speaking of Trev Alberts, so he is the leader of the athletic department, the athletic director. If you were Trev Alberts, what would you be looking for in a leader for the football program? Now, I know you said, well, I've never been a football coach. That's not my thing. But aren't there certain principles of leadership that transcend any institution?
Well, the easiest thing to look at is look at examples of the person you're considering in whatever leadership roles they have been in, right? So if you want to take Mickey Joseph, for an example, who's our interim coach, obviously he has the pedigree from the playing side. He was the Nebraska quarterback, right? And so he's got a following that side. So he understands the program, he understands the culture, right? And then you want to look at, does he have the leadership skills to lead? Well, he's made couple definitive moves here pretty quick already since he's been named interim coach. We got rid of his defensive coordinator, Eric Shenander, yep. And he's made some other changes and promoted some people. And so he's going to put his stamp on the organization while he has the opportunity. And then some people are like, well, he's never had executive experience before. That's not true, actually. He was head coach at, I believe, at Langdon University.
Langston,
in
Oklahoma.
For one, it was just one season, but his coaching tree goes back. It's long and distinguished. In fact, his first coaching job was actually right here at Omaha North, I believe, at the high school.
He did coach at North.
And so he's had a lot of stops along the way, and that has led to experience because he's worked under various head coaches along the way. So he's got the pedigree, the experience, and the culture fit. So now you want to see if you were going to give him a serious shot, what's he do with his, call it 8-week trial, right? I mean, that's what it is, a little baptism by fire. And now the downside is he didn't have time, like most coaches get hired. They're going to have a pre-game plan, if you will, before they walk in. The first thing to say, he was given basically about 45 minutes notice. Guess what? Yeah. You're the coach. And so you have to give him a little grace here. But if I were Trev Alberts, if I were Trev Alberts and I were looking for the next leader, I would be looking for someone who could definitively keep the culture in the program, because everything, it is culture-based, right? I forget his name right now. Drunken Miller is the hedge fund guy, but I think he said that, culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? And so, in other words, you've got to have the culture, because the culture is what means the team will buy in, whether it's in business, the football team, etc. If you don't have a culture that people are going to be akin to or drawn to and attracted to, in the same regard, Chip, you will repel people that are not going to be culture fits if you're clearly definitive of who you are. And we talk about that all the time. I talk about my religion. I talk about how I vote politically. And so when people apply here, we have people of all, backgrounds and color, but they know who I am. I make no bones about what I believe, how I believe it, why I believe it, etc. And that is the culture I instill in the team, right? And so it doesn't mean you have to think the same, but can you mesh with people? And there's some people that can't. We had somebody we hired recently, and within 3 days we found out sometimes you're going to hire somebody that's just not a good fit. And within 3 days, that person identified, I am definitely not a fit here. And kudos to the person for identifying it, right? So save both of us hassle. So, but leadership is critical that will people follow you? And that's the most basic example. And you can figure this stuff out pretty quickly if people are willing to buy in and follow somebody.
Let me ask you if this is a strength or a weakness in a leader or a potential leader like Mickey Joseph. So Oklahoma rolled us 49-14. The game wasn't as close as the score might indicate. Could have been worse. And he admitted afterwards, if I had it to do over again, I'd probably change our offensive game plan. As you said, it was a little haphazard and rushed. We should have slowed down our approach and at least used up more time on the clock and leave the opponent less time to score on us. And somebody asked him, well, do you think that's a sign of inexperience as a head coach? And he didn't hesitate. He said, yeah, it might be. In fact, that's what my mom said. And I thought it was kind of gutsy for him to not only admit it, but even show some humor and make a joke about it. Even my mom saw that afterwards. But do you think that's a strength or a weakness on his part?
Well, I think it's a strength when you can admit where you're lacking, right? That's the first way to get better, is identify where your weaknesses are. Now, I'm not one of these people that believe, like our old schooling system used to test you and assess you. And Chip, you're really good over here and here, but you're not so good over here. So we're going to focus on the area you're not so good. No. In the real world, when you want to succeed, let's find out the one or two skills you're good at and pour into that, make you even better at that.
Maximize
and don't
those.
do these other things.
Yeah.
We can hire somebody or delegate to somebody to do those things. That is how I found success in business. There's certain things that I do not want to do, nor should I do, because I'm not very good at them. I have two or three what we call unique abilities that I'm pretty good at. And that's where I focus my time and energy. And that's how, according to Inc. magazine, we were the second fastest growing retirement planning specific shop in the country. And so because I've learned to go full force into what I'm good at, and I don't spend time on what I'm not, I hire other people to do that. And it's the same in coaching. You have to, one, identify where your weaknesses are and then be willing to hire them. Now, as far as the inexperience, I have a motto around here, and you guys all know it. Always make new mistakes, right? I do not fire someone for making a mistake, even if it's a big one, and they happen, okay? And we can have a client upset or something. Number one, as the leader, it's on me. So fall on the sword. Mickey did that. He took the brunt of it. Look, he says it's my fault, and he owns it. And whether it's not true is irrelevant. The leader is showing you a good skill right there, and that he's willing to take the credit for the bad news, and then he'll give the credit to the team when it's good news. Now, that's a good humility, is a good quality feature in a leader. And then number two, he's willing to understand. Okay, in hindsight, this is what I've already learned. So he's telling you that he's already learned from the mistake. And exactly. With Oklahoma's offense that could have put up 70 points, exactly. Slow it down, run the clock a little bit more. But anyway, so I think give him a fair shot. And, only being a week into the game, playing the number 6 team in the country, that was a pretty tall hurdle to go up against.
Well, they have a bye week. They have this weekend off. So he's got 2 weeks to kind of hit the reset button and try to instill as much of his cultural imprint as he can, and I'm certainly rooting for him down the home stretch.
Well, I can tell you, we had fun anyway. We were at the game, the whole
You're
game.
a season ticket holder now.
And I took 2 young men. It was actually one of our employees, 2 young boys that had never been to a game or anything like that,
great.
and they got to experience it. I'm taking some new people next week as well, so that's the kind of fun, is blessing to be able to take people to their first Husker game. The environment's amazing.
Hey, an important part of leadership is having a plan, a written, defined plan. That's what we do at Retire Smart. It starts with the report card, comprehensive review of your entire situation. 402-369-7777 for a complimentary report card. Up next, you have questions. David Brooks has answers. Q&A is next on Retire Smart with David Brooks. Welcome back to Retire Smart with David Brooks. I'm Chip Maxwell. David, the first question deals with the markets. Very simple and to the point. Will the Dow go below 30,000?
I wish I could tell you I was the world's greatest prognosticator, but we don't claim to predict where the markets are going, and so to make that prediction would be a little bit silly. Now, I can talk to the odds and probability that in a recession, equity markets will go lower. And again, we don't follow the Dow that closely. We follow the S&P 500 much closer because it's a much better barometer of the economy in general. And the S&P 500 is actually a little over 500. I think 505 companies are in that index today. The Dow Jones is just 30 companies. And so it's not truly a good indicative. It's just something that the media has been doing for so long. That's still what they talk about. But, if I were a betting man, I'd probably bet, it's going to go below that number. But again, we don't make any major prognostications, but based on the economy slowing down, interest rates just went up again, and earnings are being cut. And the biggest earnings miss in just about ever in corporate history was a week ago on Friday. FedEx cut their earnings. Now, this is a bellwether transport, and when the transports, right, these are, companies that deal in logistics, moving products and services, shipping, rails, airlines, and delivery companies like FedEx, when they are telling you there's less packages going to be shipped in the coming quarters, what does that tell you about economic activity?
That's not good.
It's a leading indicator. It most likely means that there's going to be the recession, and if there's a recession means lower earnings. And if there's lower earnings under traditional valuation metrics, then yeah, high probability it would be below 30,000, and we're not that far from there. So yeah, pretty good odds. But again, I'm not going to declare, it's going to happen with certainty or not. That's just not what we do.
Does that create a major psychological shock wave, or if we see it coming, is it not that big a deal?
Not for professionals, but
Okay.
for retail and media, sure. And when it goes above and below these 10,000, 20,000, 25,000, 30, I mean, the media's called us before to talk about it went below this, whatever, so those happen. But again, 1,000-point move on the Dow today is just a 3% move, right? It's when we had 1,000-point moves 20 years ago in my career, it was a much bigger deal when the Dow was trading at 6,000, 7,000. Yeah. So
Okay.
very, very different numbers. But again, don't focus on those type of things. Focus your financial future on a plan. Put together a plan. Understand what those tools are, and that's your accounts. The money you've got invested. They're just resources to provide for you. So understand what risk level you're taking is what I would take from that question.
Next question, David, refers to Berkshire Hathaway, and some might consider this heresy, but here's the question. My wife and I are in our mid-60s and plan to retire at 70. Our Berkshire Hathaway stock is the main part of our portfolio. We're starting to wonder if Warren Buffett still has the magic touch. Berkshire invested heavily in HP, Citigroup, and Paramount, and it's not turning out well. That appears to be the latest in a series of moves that leave us a bit concerned. Should we be concerned? What do you think, David?
Again, what the question refers to is that this is the major piece of our portfolio. As a fiduciary, we don't believe you should have any more than 5% of your net worth invested in any one asset at any time. And that's simply because you take basically single stock risk. Now, Berkshire Hathaway is a conglomerate that owns hundreds of companies and has proven over time to do well. But what Berkshire does not do is they don't believe in dividends. They don't give you money back. They believe in reinvesting that capital, or they sit on the capital and they make pretty good deals. Now, Berkshire tends to do well when the economy doesn't, because they have what I call dry powder. They're sitting on $100 billion in cash plus, and so they can go in and make deals and mergers, or even kind of put a company against the wall that might really need capital, and they're not exactly the friendliest group to deal with in reality. They're pretty harsh negotiators, and so but there are what I call a forever company. If you want to buy it and hang on it forever, that's fine. But as a retirement asset, it's terrible, in my opinion. Doesn't pay you a dividend. What do you need? There's no retirement without income. So I would definitely tell you should at least consider having someone look at your portfolio, one, from a risk metric, and two, do you have an actual income plan for your retirement? Because if you're just planning on just selling off chips, bits of this when you need income, you're going to be susceptible to these market moves. Will Berkshire most likely make new highs in the future? Of course, that's probably true, right? But you don't know when, and if you're just going to sell it each month and you have to sell it when it's down 20 or 30% because we're in a recession, is that a good decision? So again, this is why retirement planning is not just picking stocks and, look, this has got a good track record. You have to have a complete financial plan that's going to address. And the other thing we didn't even talk about there is if you're just selling a stock off here and there, and if it's not, depending on what type of account it is, that could be a taxable event and create excessive taxation, short-term capital gains, long-term capital gains, or if it's in a retirement account that comes out of the IRA, it's all taxable at the highest rate, income tax. So a lot of things to be concerned with there. So I would say get a risk analysis and get together with somebody that can give you a written inflation-adjusted income plan. Have a plan. Don't just we bet on the farm on this company. That's not a plan.
Next, David, we have a 401k question. I'm in my 60s and have about $500,000 in a 401k. Sometimes I'm tempted to cash it out, which I think I can do without a penalty. However, I would pay taxes on the withdrawal. So I guess I have two questions. Does it ever make sense to cash out a 401k? And two, is there a way to minimize the tax bite on that withdrawal?
So assuming what we're talking about here is a traditional 401k, so this is money that is yet to be taxed, okay? And when people say cash it out, and had a friend of mine who was a very successful realtor, and he made this mistake and did not think about the tax implications of what he was doing and cashed out a six-figure retirement account during the '08 recession. He just had it at a bank, wasn't really earning anything, wasn't losing anything. He was like, well, the stock market doesn't look good, and he was just getting some interest, and he had this in a bank IRA with no investment.
What tax bracket
and
did that put him in?
He took the money out and then bought a nice Mercedes. And I'm like, so you paid over 40% taxes at the time he did this, and then bought a depreciating asset with the money that was going to last 7-10 years maybe. So be really cautious before you think about this term of cashing out, because usually when someone says this, they're scared of the risk within the account. And here's the problem. In the 401ks, sometimes there's no place to hide. But inside of most 401ks, you will usually have what's called a stable value fund. This is like a money market. So basically, it's not really going to earn you a whole lot of money, but it's not going to lose any money. And so if you're just nervous about risk, you can certainly have the option to place the dollars there. However, with the inflationary pressures we have today, you're still going to lose purchasing power with those dollars going forward, most likely. So what we recommend is having a plan of how to get money out of the 401k. Now, you said you're in your 60s, so you are allowed to do what's called an in-service withdrawal, even if you're still actively employed at most plans. That means once you're 59 and a half, you can remove the dollars out of your 401k. But would you want to take them to the checkbook, so to speak, take them to the house and pay all those taxes? Probably not. Again, we don't know the situation. I don't know how much money's in the account. What we do is there a way to minimize? So to get to the heart of the question, can I minimize the tax bite? Absolutely. Number one, you should consider what we call SRI, Strategic Roth Integration, a Roth conversion, at least filling up your current tax bracket. So if you're in the 22% tax bracket, go ahead and fill it up, right? Now, if you're over 63, you'd be cautious of what's called Medicare penalty lines or IRMA penalty lines, because if your income gets too high, and all this would be taxable income, you will pay a penalty at 65 or after for Medicare. And again, a lot of people aren't aware of that. So there's a lot that we can unpack here. But yes, there is a strategy, and that's actually uncovered in our report card. It's the T in the tax efficient planning in the SMART report card. So great candidate to have a report card and figure out what strategies they should be following, both on a risk analysis and a tax analysis.
I'm going to squeeze in one more 401k question, David. I'm 55 and just starting to focus on my retirement. I have 401k accounts at two previous employers. Should I move them to my new employer or leave them where they are?
So we typically don't recommend people roll 401ks into 401ks because you're going to have limited investment options. Most 401ks have a maximum of about 20 to 25 investment options. Now, if you're planning on continuing working, this is really important because this person is 55. At 55, you can access, if you're to retire, you could access your 401k before 59 and a half and not pay the 10% premature penalty.
Why not?
Because that 401ks are under different rules than IRAs, and a lot of people don't realize this. So if you roll it to an IRA, you lose that option, okay? However, if you roll it to an IRA and you don't plan on accessing those funds, you will have a whole plethora of new options available to invest or de-risk or whatever it is you choose to do with those assets. So there's a lot to unpack here as well. And you mentioned you have two of them, so you could your current employer, you're not going to be able to take money out of that, but your old ones you could, and it would depend on when you need access to the money. Most of this is going to be deferred, I would think, for future use. So it may be the best option is to roll those dollars to an IRA and even start like a Roth conversion process for this person, or get those invested in a risk-adjusted way that makes the person comfortable investing during a recession.
David, we're out of time for Q&A this week, but if listeners would like to schedule a 15-minute phone conversation with one of our licensed financial advisors, how many openings do we have?
We actually have 12 of those available this week. We've worked to help rearrange the schedule of some of the advisors on the team because of the demand. So we have 12 of those available. This is a 15-minute phone call with a license.
Welcome back to Retire Smart with David Brooks. I'm Chip Maxwell. Well, David, before it was Disney defending sexual wokeness in preschool. Now here's a headline from Bloomberg. Disney builds a new Magic Kingdom in sports betting. Hey, Brooksy, the Mouse is offering 7.5 points if you take Indiana against Nebraska. You want some of that action?
Yeah.
David, you lived in Orlando for 2 decades. What's going on here?
That might be a bit of a goofy bet, and if I lose exactly, you might call me Dumbo, right?
Oh, boy, here we go. Insert the joke of your choice here, listener.
But, this is an issue that some shareholders are kind of pushing back on because of the ethics and morals that they associated with the Disney company and the brand. that Walt Disney established. And again, we've talked about this. The company has gone more and more politically in a direction, but this gets to a bigger topic, and that is now we are pushing gambling on our youth in particular in a very aggressive fashion. And now Disney is going to have it right in their app where you can go to their sports book, and obviously certain states will allow it and others won't, but it's very easy to drive across the border when you're in Nebraska and into Iowa and download any of these betting apps. And
that is really insidious. The drug, so to speak, the narcotic, the addictive element is just right there at the push of a button.
Well, you saw this with the Barstool sports guy started doing these stock meme bets and all this during COVID, and millions of kids were following and opening accounts on these little app trading things. Robinhood, we talked about. Unfortunately, a young man lost his life down in Lincoln, right? Based on depression from thinking he lost all those dollars. And they're preying on folks. And it's not only just Disney, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. My son, who does, he wants to love to be a professional gamer, but does heavy streaming and this community out there, and it's massive. People have no idea how much content is being shared over here. They are these streamers, and the popular ones are being endorsed to put out these gambling sites or even send people to these play casinos like what you would think on your phone apps, and they're betting real money. And they're acting, and the endorphin rush of that, it's just like people in a casino. They can't get out.
That's what I mean. There's an addictive element
to it. Yes, and it's scary because they are preying on our younger folks in an aggressive fashion. Now, the number one streamer in the world, now again, don't hold me to who's quoting this, but according to my son, and there is some data back there, is this kid called XQC. He's a French-Canadian kid, and I've watched him several times, my son. He is actually hilarious, some of the things. But he was a professional gamer in esports a couple years ago, but he became so popular on what's called streaming. He's one of the biggest followers, and according to certain reports, he makes over $750,000 to $1 million a month just from his streaming activity, along with other endorsements. But he was one of these such that was given this game, but he's since realized, you know what? I don't think I like this, and he actually has said no. So it's kind of neat to see him push back. But I'm telling you, this is a problem in general in our society where you have these companies that just for the mighty dollar, companies like this are going to prey on younger and younger people, and that should be of serious concern for folks.
Well, you think of Disney's legacy as the ultimate family-friendly entertainment venue.
Well, yeah, you can imagine a family of four going down for the vacation, and mom's waiting in line in the Magic Kingdom, and dad's like, I'll be right back, and he runs into the ESPN Sportsbook Center at Disney and places a bet on on the team or whatever. Sorry, kids, we're not going to be able to go to the park tomorrow. Dad lost all the money. Oh, that could be bad.
All right, let's move on to this Fox Business headline. Now, we see these periodically, David, these studies that come out. It's actually a Wallet Hub study. Fox Business reported on it. Best U.S. cities for retirement in 2022. And there were 182 cities studied. David, we didn't do so well in these here parts. Lincoln came in at 59, Des Moines at 143, Omaha at 146. Should we be concerned, or should we just dismiss this?
Well, I mean, let's look at the factors that were in the list, right? So if you look at the top couple of cities, basically 4 out of the top 5 are in the South.
They're Florida, and South Carolina.
Yeah, South Carolina is number 1 at Charleston, and I have a lot of family, as if you listen to the show, in South Carolina, and I own real estate there. And South Carolina is a very friendly environment. People are friendly. It's just a great environment. Cost of living is very inexpensive, and the weather's pretty good, right? And then, of course, the same thing. Number 2 was Orlando, which is, it is grown incredible just since I left. A massive growth in Orlando. Now, it's getting a little out of control on the price point there. They've gotten a little ahead of themselves, but Cincinnati did surprise me, to be honest with you. But it's a very inexpensive city relative to other cities to live at, which was number 3 on the list. But then you still back in Florida, in Miami and Fort Lauderdale. And again, it has to do with weather, culture, entertainment, all these other things available to you. So these are always interesting studies that they put out there. But I don't think you're going to see any city that can have negative 30 degrees in the top 10 anytime soon.
Well, Cincinnati, Ohio snuck in there at number 3. I know it gets cold there, Wilmington, Delaware, but otherwise, Salt Lake City. Otherwise, you're right. Tampa, Scottsdale, Arizona, and San Francisco, California, some more warm weather places. So maybe that's the answer to that one right there. All right, in the time we have left, David, I saw an article in Barron's, and the headline is, "Markets are volatile. Here are the strategies advisors recommend." And I wanted to get your take on whether you agree or disagree with what some of these people are promoting. I saw some language in there that we use. A couple of people mentioned Roth conversions, which you mentioned earlier in this show. I saw tax loss harvesting. One said, this is the exact quote, volatility is our friend, not our enemy. That's an interesting statement. And I also saw the term downside protection, which I know is another priority here at Retire Smart. Let me just turn you loose in the time we have left and tell us what you like and don't like in some of these opinions.
Well, several of the strategies they mentioned are in the 65 different strategies that we will use to employ to help our clients understand how to navigate the markets and mitigate or reduce potentially their tax bill, whether it's federally, state, capital gains, et cetera. And so the first one that sticks out exactly is something that is our primary strategy we're using now, and that's the SRI I mentioned earlier, strategic Roth integration, by converting dollars to a Roth. And when you do this when the market is negative or down, you're getting an additional discount basically on your taxes. So again, I don't have my little handy slinky, but I've talked about on the radio before, if I had a slinky in my hand, imagine that was $100,000 in your account, and it went down and it's only worth $60,000, and you choose to convert it when it's worth $60,000, you pay tax on the 60, not the 100. And then when it rebounds, assuming it would in the future, when it gets back to 100, all those gains are tax-free,
no
right?
Taxes.
So you can, you can take advantage by doing Roth conversions. Now, you can't always time the market perfect to do it, but it certainly makes sense to consider doing it while markets are in a depressed mode. So that is a great strategy that they talk about. Another one they talk about, and there's something we do all the time. In fact, I did it yesterday for a client, and that's what we call tax loss harvesting.
What is that?
And so this is basically where you are going to sell one asset at a loss and book a tax loss. So if you bought a stock a couple of years ago and it's gone down in value, and many of the tech stocks in the last 2 years have done just that, and so you're negative in your return, if you sell it, right, you now booked that loss. You turn around and buy a like asset. You can't buy the same asset. You have to wait 31 days to do that, or it would be what's called a wash sale. But if you could buy a like asset with the dollars, and when that asset retrieves back up, you still get the gain when the market rebounds, so you didn't lose out on the gain potentially, but you got to book and harvest a tax loss. You can then use that loss at your choosing in the same calendar year to reduce or eliminate a taxable gain elsewhere. And that could be a stock, a mutual fund, a bond. You could have a rental property you wanted to get rid of and you want to sell it, and by tax loss harvesting out of your stock portfolio, you compare that loss with your rental gain and wipe out the tax. And I've had some fun making those phone calls to a client or their CPA. Hey, we just booked an $18,000 capital loss for your client. Do you need it, or can we use it? That's a nice phone call to make to the CPA, right? And, of course, they appreciate. Thank you for the heads up. Actually, they just called in, and we're potentially selling XYZ asset, and we have a gain. And so now you can let the client know, hey, that gain you had over there, you're not going to pay any taxes on it. So tax loss harvesting can be huge if you understand how to utilize it correctly. And that's where, to the phrase you talked about, volatility, in fact, can be your friend, because you can take advantage by shifting your assets and just tweaking the allocation in volatile markets and take advantage. It can also enhance your return. If you've got a pile of dollars and you wanted to just start investing, like you're starting day one, I just inherited $1 million, what do I do? Well, you typically don't want to put all those dollars to work on day one. So you might kind of have a strategy how you're going to allocate the dollars, and then you buy every time the market dips 3 or 4%. You could allocate a piece of that capital to the market, and you're just what we call dollar cost averaging to the market, but you're going to end up with a better average rate of return over time. At least historically speaking, that has been the case. So there's lots of things you can do to get yourself in a better tax situation. The key, though, Chip, is you have to be proactive in doing it. And that's what we do. That is the T in the SMART plan. It's part of the report card where we show you what we think are the low-hanging fruit, the potential tax mitigation strategies that could save you sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars, and in several cases, it's over $1 million in savings, depending on the amount of assets and resources someone has and how much time we have to work with them. But you don't know what you don't know. So the key here is take action and find out what you might be missing out on. There's a lot of bad news out there. I know we've been sharing a lot of doom and gloom news on the show recent weeks, but we just tell it like it is. That's part of being a fiduciary, in my opinion, is I got to tell you what I think is my honest opinion for you. Take advantage, though, and find out what you might be missing out on by getting our report card.
A great first step is the SMART checklist, 34 items in inventory to do a quick check. Are you ready for retirement? If you want to dip a toe in the water, Call us at 402-369-7777 and schedule a 15-minute appointment with one of our licensed advisors. Or go ahead and take the plunge. Get the report card, the total review of your situation, complimentary report card. And don't forget about that state income tax credit. If you need the link for that, we have it for you. 402-369-7777. David, bring us home.
Hey, listen, we just had one of our fall fun Fridays here where we had a lot of our clients come in and volunteer and help sew together some wonderful fleece blankets that are going to be delivered next week over to Project Harmony. So great to bless those folks, and thank you to all those that help support that.
Thank you for listening to Retire Smart with David Brooks. I'm Chip Maxwell. For David Brooks and the entire team at Retire Smart, have a great week.